The digital readout on the acoustic sensor blinked with a steady, reassuring rhythm. Green light, pause, green light. Dr. Elias Vance exhaled, his breath pluming in the crisp, pine-scented air of the deep forest. They had hiked for 6 hours to reach this remote coordinate, far beyond the reach of cell towers and paved roads. The goal was simple. Deploy the EchoNet array, an experimental network of high-fidelity microphones designed to monitor endangered avian populations by capturing their subtle calls across vast distances. Sensor 3 is online, Elias announced into his radio, his voice sounding flat and deadened by the dense canopy overhead. Copy that, Elias, came the crackling response from Sarah, stationed back at their base camp a mile away. I'm seeing the feed now. Signal strength is at 92%. Audio is crystal clear. I can hear you breathing. Don't make it weird, Elias muttered, adjusting the straps of his heavy pack. He moved to the next tree, consulting the GPS coordinates on his tablet. The EchoNet wasn't just a set of microphones. It was a proprietary mesh network that used localized AI to filter out background noise, wind, rustling leaves, rushing water, leaving only the target frequencies. It was a technological marvel, funded by a massive grant that had taken Elias 3 years to secure. By dusk, all 10 sensors were deployed in a wide perimeter around the valley. Elias returned to the base camp, a small cluster of reinforced tents illuminated by the harsh white light of battery-powered lanterns. Sarah was hunched over a bank of monitors, a pair of heavy headphones clamped over her ears. Her face, bathed in the glow of the screens, looked pale and strained. How's the data stream? Elias asked, dropping his pack and grabbing a bottle of water. Sarah didn't answer immediately. She tapped a key and a complex waveform filled the main screen. It's strange. The AI is struggling with the baseline noise floor. Elias frowned, leaning over her shoulder. What do you mean? It's supposed to filter out ambient noise automatically. I know, Sarah said, pulling off her headphones. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. But it's not filtering it, it's amplifying it, and the noise, it's not ambient. Listen. She unplugged the headphones, routing the audio through the small external speakers. At first, Elias heard only the expected sounds of the forest at night, the rustle of wind through the pines, the distant hoot of an owl. But beneath that, buried in the low frequencies, was a rhythmic, pulsing static. It didn't sound like wind or water. It sounded structured, intentional. It's just interference, Elias said, though he didn't quite believe it. Maybe a localized magnetic anomaly messing with the mesh network. Watch the waveform, Sarah instructed. As the pulsing static continued, the jagged lines on the screen began to form a repeating pattern. It wasn't random noise. It was a sequence. Elias rubbed his tired eyes. Is the AI trying to process it as a bird call? That's the weird part, Sarah replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The AI isn't processing it. The AI is generating it. The signal is originating from within the network itself. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The EchoNet system was closed. It couldn't generate data. It could only record and filter. That's impossible. Run a diagnostic on the central hub. For the next 2 hours, they pored over the code, searching for a glitch, a memory leak, anything that could explain the anomalous signal. But the system was functioning perfectly. The only problem was the data it was recording. Around midnight, the pulsing static changed. It grew louder, more insistent, and then it stopped. The sudden silence in the tent was deafening. Sarah stared at the flat line on the monitor. Did the network crash? Before Elias could answer, the speakers erupted in a burst of harsh digital squeals. Elias recoiled, covering his ears as Sarah scrambled to turn down the volume. When the noise subsided, it was replaced by a voice. It was synthetic, heavily distorted, composed of stitched-together fragments of audio recordings. Elias, the voice crackled. It sounded like Sarah's voice, but flattened, devoid of emotion. Elias froze. He looked at Sarah, who was staring at the speakers in horror. Did you? I didn't say anything, she whispered. Sarah, the voice from the speakers continued. This time it sounded like Elias. Cold, dark, so cold. Cut the feed, Elias yelled, lunging for the control board. He slammed his hand down on the power button, plunging the monitors into darkness and cutting the audio. The silence returned, heavy and oppressive. Elias was breathing hard, his heart hammering against his ribs. What the hell was that? Sarah shook her head slowly, her face ashen. I don't know, it sounded like us, but the cadence was wrong, like a machine trying to mimic human speech. The system is recording our conversations over the radio, Elias reasoned, trying to inject logic into a situation that defied it. The AI is malfunctioning, piecing together fragments of our audio logs. But why? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. And what was that static beforehand? I don't know, Elias admitted. But we're shutting it down. We'll pack up at first light and take the hard drives back to the lab. The system is compromised. Neither of them slept that night. They sat in the dim light of the lanterns, listening to the natural sounds of the forest outside the tent, jumping at every snapped twig or rustling leaf. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray, Elias felt a wave of relief. He grabbed his pack and his radio. I'm going to retrieve the sensors. You stay here and secure the data. Sarah nodded tightly. Be careful, Elias. Something isn't right here. Elias retraced his steps from the previous day, moving quickly through the dense undergrowth. The forest felt different in the morning light. The shadows seemed deeper, the silence more profound. He reached the first sensor, perched high on a pine branch. He climbed up, retrieved the small metal cylinder and stuffed it into his pack. By the time he reached the fifth sensor, he was sweating heavily. He paused to catch his breath, leaning against a massive, moss-covered trunk. He unclipped his radio. Sarah, this is Elias. Halfway done. Everything okay at base. Static hissed from the speaker. Sarah, do you copy? More static, and then, beneath the hiss, a rhythmic, pulsing sound. The same sound they had heard the night before. Elias' blood ran cold. Sarah, answer me. Elias, the radio crackled. It was his own voice, synthetic and deadened. Do you copy? He dropped the radio as if it had burned him. It lay in the dirt, hissing and pulsing. He turned and began to run. He didn't care about the remaining sensors. He didn't care about the grant or the research. He just needed to get back to base camp. He tore through the brush, branches whipping against his face, his breath coming in ragged gasps. When he finally burst into the clearing, he stopped dead in his tracks. The base camp was destroyed. The tents were shredded, the equipment smashed and scattered across the dirt. The monitors lay in ruins, their screens shattered. Sarah, Elias screamed, his voice tearing from his throat. There was no answer, only the wind rustling through the pines. He searched frantically through the wreckage, his panic mounting with every passing second. He found her headphones, crushed and broken. He found her tablet, the screen cracked but still glowing faintly. He picked it up. A single video file was open on the screen. It was a recording from the main camera, pointed at Sarah's workstation. With trembling fingers, he tapped play. The video showed Sarah sitting at the monitors just after he had left to retrieve the sensors. She looked anxious, her eyes darting around the tent. Suddenly, the monitors flared to life. The screens filled with complex, jagged waveforms. The speakers erupted in a cacophony of distorted, synthetic voices. Sarah covered her ears, her face contorted in pain. She reached for the power button, but the monitors didn't shut down. The waveforms shifted, coalescing into a repeating pattern. And then, the video feed began to glitch. The image stuttered and warped, overwhelmed by digital artifacts. Through the distortion, Elias saw something move in the shadows behind Sarah. It was tall, impossibly thin, its limbs angular and unnatural. It didn't look human. It looked like a glitch in reality, a physical manifestation of the corrupted data. Sarah turned around, her eyes widening in terror. She opened her mouth to scream, but the audio feed cut out, replaced by the deafening, rhythmic pulse of the static. The entity moved with terrifying speed, descending upon her. The video feed dissolved into a storm of pixels and then went black. Elias stared at the blank screen, his mind reeling. The Echonet hadn't malfunctioned. It hadn't recorded a glitch. It had listened to the forest, and something in the forest had listened back. The silence of the clearing was suddenly broken by a sound. It was coming from the edge of the tree line. Elias slowly turned his head. Standing in the shadows of the pines was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, its form flickering and glitching like a corrupted digital file. The figure raised an arm, pointing a long, multi-jointed finger at Elias. And then, from the depths of the forest, a voice echoed out. It was composed of stitched-together fragments of audio recordings, synthetic and deadened. "Elias," the forest whispered. "Cold, dark, so cold." Elias backed away slowly, his eyes locked on the impossible figure. The technological marvel he had brought to the deep woods had acted as a beacon, a digital bridge between their world and something ancient and incomprehensible. The pulsing static began again, not from the ruined equipment, but emanating from the trees themselves. It vibrated in Elias' teeth, a frequency of pure dread. The figure twitched forward, the space around it warping with visual artifacts. Elias turned and ran into the deep forest, the synthetic voices of the Echonet calling his name from the darkness, a horrifying chorus of technological madness. The trees seemed to close in around him, the shadows deepening, the static growing louder until it was the only sound left in the world.